are all looking for adventure. We are
All right. Hey, guys, welcome to the Marriage Adventure Podcast. We're your hosts, Daniel and Bonnie Hoover, and you're here for another exhilarating, exciting episode of What's Up in the Marriage Adventure. Did you like that?
Yeah,
that
exhilarating.
The all right. That's
McConaughey.
McConaughey, yeah. Yeah, I heard on the news the other day he was thinking about throwing his hat in the political ring.
Oh, come on.
I know, but
all
then
these actors.
I thought all the people probably said that about Reagan back in the 70s, so maybe he'll
Who knows?
be okay. He's going to have to take a shower, though, because he doesn't like wear deodorant.
That's gross.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you used to think he was handsome.
And there's always that.
Hey, we're so glad you're here now that we're out of our little conversation.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us today. So we talk a lot on the podcast. We've talked about Bonnie's garden and the farm and different things, and we just got done messing with the donkeys. We have three little mini donkeys, and they're cute and they're awesome. And seeing them run is just, they get the zoomies sometimes, and they just start running.
So
but
fun.
Bonnie, in the garden, you recently kind of had an issue in garden world.
Well, it is so hot here right now. It is incredibly hot, and so there's just a fight right now. We're not getting a lot of rain, so there's the constant fight of making sure everything stays watered enough that it doesn't just wither and die. That's one thing. But so last year was a huge experiment in the garden, and
It's your first year.
yeah. And I took a lot of notes, and I did a lot of studying, and why did this fail, and why did that fail, and I lost a battle to vine borers and squash bugs last year.
Oh.
And,
So preface this, you're wanting to do an organic garden.
Yep, which
that usually
really
translates in dead
bugs.
things.
Yeah, dead things, bugs. Yeah, so I find out, if you're not putting some sort of poison on it, then you're going to have to deal with the bugs. So this year I went into that knowing it, and I planted extra so that I could have, I started earlier thinking, okay, I can get this done earlier so that
You counted for the loss.
I counted for the loss. I figured, but I know that they're there. Now I know how to fight them. I know what a vine borer is. I know what a squash bug is. So I'm going to pick them off every day. And I did. I was diligent, and I had 3 incredible weeks of so many zucchini and squash.
Oh, we did, man. We were overrun.
Yep. I froze. I mean, I put stuff away. I had so much. We ate stewed squash like a couple of times a week because that's the way y'all like it the best. And we grilled some, and we were enjoying a life of everything squash and zucchini.
Just like the Garden of Eden.
And then I walk out one day and see one of the plants is starting to, they're turning colors. I was like, no. This is what happened last year. And so I inspect, and there's no vine borer there that I know of. I can't see any evidence. A vine borer.
What a vine borer is.
They are these little bugs, and if you see them on there, then they are laying little microscopic, like really tiny eggs around the base of your plant. Well, I had even, to avoid that, what they do, they lay the eggs there, and then they get into the squash, and they come from the inside and eat the squash from the inside of the roots.
Just like that alien movie we saw a couple weeks ago. They bed their alien people in it.
Oh, that's weird.
That's sorry.
Okay.
I was going off.
But yeah, there's like these. They plant these little alien eggs in there, and then if you get in there, you see they've turned into this larva, this bug, this worm that just eats the inside of the plant from the inside out. So you don't know until it's too late because they're on the inside. But I knew I was looking for that this year. I was killing those bugs. There's also the squash bug, and they lay more visible eggs on the leaves, and I was picking those off. I was doing everything I could. And
what about the ones that got on the corn? What were those?
The corn.
Yeah, they were on the corn.
Last
stalks,
year?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Last year, that was Japanese beetles.
I don't do much in the garden.
Japanese beetles last year. But I moved the corn where it wasn't near the peach trees because the peach trees were attracting them, and I just let them have the peach trees this year.
Very complicated.
Very complicated. But anyway, once I figured out what I'm fighting, I'm like, okay, I can do this. I can And I did for a good 3 weeks. And then I start seeing they're doing weird things. What are these like diamond shape, like things on the vines, that the color that's discolored, and what is happening? And so I start researching. It's not bugs.
What'd you find out?
It was something called Plestosporium blight. Plectosporium blight.
That was what I was going to guess.
Plectosporium blight. Never in my life have I heard of such a thing, but it's a disease. It's a disease on it. It's just a disease that outbreaks, and it's kind of has to do with high humidity and certain temperature. Humidity, not humility.
They're very humble bugs.
They are. But, and so
it's not a bug though, is it?
No, it's like just like a bacteria kind of thing. And so then I start researching, okay, well, how do I avoid that? Well, then I start reading, this pathogen has been reported to survive in crop residue in the soil for up to 3 years.
What?
So, yeah, it can be
It's exactly like that Alien movie. They've been here for thousands of years. They just implanted. Yes.
So it's saying to rotate out of any kind of like curcubit, which is like a type of like, it's like, okay, so
we all know
things,
what that is.
Yeah, well, it's things like squash that have vines, or cucumbers I can't plant there. I can't really put green beans there. Things that have vines that are going to.
So what can you plant there in the next 2 years?
I don't know. I'm going to try carrots. We'll see. But it's supposed to probably just lie open. I probably shouldn't, but it's like a huge portion of my garden. So
yeah, it is.
I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. So I fight this one thing or two enemies all summer, only to lose it to something I wasn't even aware of. It was like this invisible enemy that I had no idea was even there. And so then I was so discouraged. I'm like, well, I'm losing them to that. So I'm like, well, I'll just keep picking the squash that are there until it's done, and I would rip them out as they would go. And by the end, wouldn't you know it, that I even found vine borers in them because I stopped worrying about that too. So I even lost to those two after all that. Yep.
Bonnie.
I know.
I'm so sorry.
I know. It's heartbreaking, right?
Can you imagine though what farmers that really make? I mean, this just kind of.
This is a hobby.
For us, it's a hobby.
And
it helps.
Feeds our family a little bit in the grocery
store.
Could you imagine
the farmers? That's why we have chemicals.
That's exactly right, because it saves. You can't. So it was.
And so
frustrating.
I think a key thing there was you got so discouraged you stopped fighting them.
Yeah, I just stopped fighting. I was like, well, I can't beat that enemy, so I'm just going to quit fighting the others too and just give in and let it go.
Did you start using chemicals?
No. I just pulled them all up. I threw them all away.
Sticking to your convictions.
Yeah, but I threw them all away, and then there's no crop. There's no fruit at all because they're gone. So, I was out there so frustrated that day pulling things out, and I remember telling you, how can I win a battle when I don't even know that there's an enemy there, that I don't know the real enemy? How can I win it? And it just really, it translates. It made me think about marriage and how couples spend so much time fighting each other over things that we think are the main thing and trying to win, and you're in the wrong, I'm in the right, and just fighting over this or fighting over that. And at the end of the day, we've got the wrong enemy.
Well, and it's I have couples that come and they'll literally start arguing in front of me. So it's basically the argument that happened in their kitchen the night before now translates in front of me, and I'm now just a witness. Like I'm not really in. I mean, they don't even. I think they forget that I'm there for a moment, and they start arguing, and then it progresses from. And this is how it happens in marriage, right? Yeah. It progresses from one topic to the next topic to the next. Oh, let me go back 10 years. Let me go back 15 years. Drag this into it. And we forget what we're even talking about, much less who the enemy is. So if you saw obviously you clicked on the podcast today, you're watching it, you're listening to it, and the topic for today is know your enemy. Because if you don't know who your real enemy is, then how do we win? And I think often we view our spouse as the enemy.
Well, it's easier to view you as the enemy than take responsibility and make me think I'm the enemy. I mean, because I'm right. I've got my ideas. I know what I like. I know what I dislike. I know that you're the problem. You've got to be the enemy. It's got to be you, because it's certainly not me.
Yeah. And listen, there are times in marriage, I'm the problem. It's 100% my fault. Or there's times, you're the problem. It's 100%
right.
your fault. Sometimes it's just both of us. It's our vantage point.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if the topic of today's podcast is if we even dig deeper, if we even dig further, we'll find that there's an enemy greater than just your spouse.
Absolutely.
So Ephesians 6:12, I almost said 6:2. Ephesians 6:12 says, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood," meaning you, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. What does that verse tell us, Bob?
Whew, that's loaded. What it's saying is that my spouse is not my enemy. My spouse is not the one that I'm ultimately fighting against, but there is a sneaky, and at the core, I mean, you're not evil, but our enemy is evil.
Mm-hmm.
And if he can be sneaky enough to make me think you're the enemy, then he's deflected.
I can be selfish.
I can too, certainly. That's called flesh. That's me wanting my way.
So let's define, the Apostle Paul used the word flesh a lot. There were times that Scripture in the New Testament uses flesh to mean flesh and bone.
Well,
like
he said
skin,
flesh and blood here.
Flesh and blood, right. Yep, in that verse. But there's other times in certain translations the Apostle Paul is talking about flesh. In some translations, it doesn't say the word flesh, it says old nature. And I think that's very descriptive. So when we talk about our flesh, or when Apostle Paul is talking about our flesh, what's he talking about? It's that old nature that we used to have prior to being adopted into the family of God, prior to following after Christ, prior to us becoming Christians. We had this old nature that was cut off from God, that was corrupt, that was selfish, and then it was replaced.
That's how we met our needs.
It's how we met our needs. It's how our mind, will, and emotions got our needs met. Our soul met its needs through our flesh. It's the only way we had. It's the only option we had. My emotions manipulated this situation. My will, just fought for self-preservation, different things like that. But then I step into Christ. I become a Christian. He comes and he lives within me. He replaces that old nature with a brand new nature, the righteousness of Christ. He takes that sin nature out and puts a righteous nature in me. That's a lot of people may not understand that. They think we have two natures warring against each other. No, we have the righteousness of Christ. We don't have that sin nature. But we do have the ability to live according to the old nature. It's like we're living like we still have that nature.
Well, we didn't get a new mind, and we didn't erase all our past experiences. It didn't erase how we remember that we get our needs met.
Right.
We're learning to live according to our new nature, in Christ. But we didn't get all that old stuff erased. That's what's called renewing our minds. So it's a process, but our flesh still wants to step in sometimes. So
it's when our flesh, basically, to put it, long story short, it's any time I'm living independent of Christ and trying to live independent to get my needs met.
Yep.
Instead of living dependent on Him for my needs, I live independent to try to get my needs met, reverting to the old self. So
there are times we have that our flesh is the thing that's that's the troublemaker in the relationship. It's our flesh. I'm being selfish. I want my way, my rights, me.
Yeah. So let's talk for a second. How do we, if we have this issue, how do we handle this issue? I think number one is when we get in an argument with our spouse, we have to be able to move through it. So in marriage, you're going to argue, you're going to fight. A lot of people, they think, oh, we don't have a good marriage because we constantly disagree. No, that's called being human.
Right.
So in marriage, you're going to argue, you're going to fight. Not like fist fight, I don't mean that way. But the true measure of a healthy marriage is how quickly you can forgive and move forward through the disagreement. Not that you don't have a disagreement, because sometimes that problem solves. We disagree on things. Well, good. We get to dig in and figure out the right way to do it.
It usually brings clarity.
It allows me to know you deeper. and for you to understand me deeper. And there's not a bad thing there. But a true sign of a healthy marriage is how quickly we can forgive and move through that disagreement. I think a great illustration of that is like fitness. Man, I can tell that I'm out of shape when I lose my breath easy and I'm hunched over, hands on knees, and it takes me a few minutes to get my heart rate back down.
Yeah.
But I can tell when I'm in really good shape when I don't lose my breath easy and I regain a proper heart rate quickly. And I think that's the kind of a similar thing. I think we can tell spiritual or health in a marriage when we can forgive, move through it.
You're going to have the adrenaline rushes where you're pushing hard and you're both butting heads and all of that, but being able to calm and come back.
And not stuff it.
No.
Not stuff it, but handle it, work through it, offer grace, offer mercy, own your stuff, look at your perspective, their perspective, and work through it.
Yep.
And this is largely based on, I think, three things. I think one, our emotional maturity as a human is how emotionally mature we are. And it's that ability to bounce back. When you have an argument, I can forgive, move through it, and I don't hold on to that grudge. I can bounce back pretty quick.
I think we're better at that in our 40s than we were in our 20s.
Well, you're in your 40s. I'm in my 50s. So, yes, thank you for bringing that up.
But emotional maturity comes with age a lot of times and learning how to relate to each other. We've worked through a lot of things emotionally, so we've got a lot more history and experience of learning how to emotionally control ourselves.
And there's just some stuff I just don't care about as much anymore that I used to get and I used to care a lot about. I think that comes through emotional maturity. I also think it comes through spiritual maturity.
Yes.
The deeper we walk with Christ, the more we allow Christ to be lived in and through us, not relying on the flesh, but living dependent on Christ daily.
And that helps control our emotional maturity. That brings emotional maturity.
And then I think the third thing that helps us to move through it is our connection as a couple. Connection is one of the most important factors of a marriage. And what do I mean by connection? I mean that that friendship that we've developed, that care that I've developed, that I care more about you than I do the issue at hand, or I care more about you than I care about me winning. And it's that emotional connection, friendship connection, physical connection.
Yeah,
if we're connected, then we have a lot easier time moving through stuff. But if we're disconnected, just like with the Spirit, man, if I'm disconnected from Him,
can't trust.
Boy, howdy.
Yeah.
So I think number one is in helping your vine borers and all your gardens, being able to move through it. What's the second thing there?
Well, then it's super important, and that's what we've called it today, is know your enemy. And that's what we talked about. We're not wrestling against each other, truly. I'm going to say there, and we've said this time and time again, but if you're not aware of a spiritual reality, there is a spiritual reality that is far bigger than the physical that we see. And Scripture says, and we read it, that we're not wrestling against flesh and blood, but we're wrestling against the forces of this world, principalities, spiritual darkness that wants to come against us, because the enemy, the devil, hates God, and he hates us because we are his children. We are the betrothed to Christ, and he wants to destroy us. And John 10:10 says that the thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. And that's huge.
Highlight the word only.
That's his only mission, is to steal our joy and our peace and all the things God's put in our heart to kill us.
And destroy our influence.
And destroy. Yep. It's like, I think about the whatever that pathogen was in the garden that it just comes through and just flattens and takes every ounce of nutrient out of that plant so it can no longer produce fruit.
And what's amazing is when you look at your garden, a month ago, man, it was overflowing. It was
Yes,
gorgeous.
abundance.
It really was beautiful. All the varieties of plants, you could walk in among it.
Life to the fullest.
Life to the fullest. It was busting the seams.
Yes.
And then just 2 weeks later, it's a barren. I mean, you've got half of your garden now is just gone.
Yep.
It's dirt. It's tilled over dirt. We've tilled it over, and that is a really poignant picture of what it can look like to go from just overflowing life, abundance, to the enemy can come in and just take it out.
Yeah. Well, and it's
Flatten
that,
it.
and like those vine borers just start destroying the inside, it sucks all the nutrients out so that no fruit can be produced. And I think that happens with the enemy, where he comes in and he sucks all the life out of us because we're so entangled emotionally with each other and fighting here that we can no longer bear the fruit of Christ in our life, in our marriage. We can't empathize. We can't have love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, all those things with each other, with our children, with the people around us, because we're consumed. We're being consumed from the inside out, and it's destructive to our hearts. So we can no longer produce fruit. Well, then he's won.
Well, and 1 Peter 5:8 gives a great illustration of that. When it says, you said being consumed from the inside out, it's like it says be sober-minded. So when I think of somebody that's not sober, they're drunk or they're high on something from the inside
is controlling
them. And that verse says, be sober-minded. Don't let something else control you, but be watchful and look out for those things. And the sad thing is you were looking out.
Yep.
You were looking out for those. You were trying to do your best, but he came in in a way you didn't know. Yep. And it says, in that verse, it says, your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. That's his mission. He is finding someone to destroy.
To chew up and spit out and to keep us from producing fruit.
You may be listening today thinking, I'm that person. Right now, he's chewing me up and spitting me out.
So what can we do if we know who our enemy is, we know it's the devil, we know it's not our spouse, what can we do to move forward in this? Because we can get stuck in thinking our spouse is the devil, and that you're the devil, not the devil, and we go at each other and we have lost our focus. Many times people lose their marriage, then they've lost their ministry, they've lost their family, they've lost everything because we are so consumed with fighting each other that we've taken our eye off the ball and we don't know the truth anymore.
Well, I think we have to lock arms with each other. And we do this in a number of ways, but you and your spouse need to work together to devise an offensive strategy, an offensive attack against the enemy and your own selfishness. And you do that by living on mission. And how do we live on mission? Well, this is a great time to tell you guys about the Marriage Adventure book. What is the Marriage Adventure book? It's a book we came out with a year or two ago, and it's discovering God's mission for your marriage. And man, God created marriage for more exciting things than just living together for 50 years, to buy homes, to have kids, to raise children, to manage life day to day. He created it for you to live on mission and to make a difference in the world. And one of the great byproducts, Bonnie, we've seen from living on mission, developing a mission statement, core values for our family, is that it helps us to work together as a team. And we have teamwork, and then that teamwork develops this intimate friendship. It bonds our hearts together, and then it overflows in this intimate relationship. And so you can pick up the book on Amazon. Just type in The Marriage Adventure, Discovering Mission for Your Marriage. Type in our names, Daniel, Bonnie, Hoover. Or you can go to themarriageadventure.com and find it there in our store.
Yep. So once you have decided to lock arms and to live on mission and to devise this strategy to work together against your enemy, what does that look like? I think there are a few quick things we can throw out, just a couple of tips here that can help you. The first is to guard against known attacks. I think we all know that there are our weaknesses. We tend to avoid those, and the things like, okay, I know that it's not smart for one of us to be, to ride in a car with the opposite sex. That's not our parent, our spouse or our parent, and or our child, and alone, right? And so we put up hedges. There's just not, there are known attacks, ways we know the devil will attack marriage in general.
We know that, and because we've seen it in other couples, that it's not wise for us to spend an overly abundant amount of time with another couple without any guardrails in place. Because I see a lot of affairs happen between friendships of families and couples that let their guard down.
Yeah.
And that's a dangerous place. And so those are just some things that we know. I also know that there's nothing good for me to do after you go to bed on the computer. Right? There's just too much temptation there. And I'm a guy, and guys, if you're a guy and you're living in this age, listen, it's everywhere.
It's too available.
Porn is everywhere. And so I just know that's a place I don't need to go. So how do we combat that? We go to bed at the same time together.
We put filters on
the computers, on the phones. You hold the passwords. You can see every website I look at.
Yep.
And those are just ways that we help combat that.
Yep. That's the squash bug. We know that's going to be an attack.
That's right.
We know the devil's going to try to come in that way. It's a front door, and it's not sneaky. So,
no, and I think you need to sit down as a couple, maybe on a date night or sometime, and identify those areas. Maybe listen to this podcast together, and then talk about it. Identify those areas and how can we put up fences, hedges, things that's just prudent. Yep. I mean, you would never go to bed and leave your front door wide open.
Right.
It's just not wise. And so you put locks on your doors. Locks on your doors.
We guard against the known attacks. And the second thing is be humble in our strengths, because too many times we get cocky and think, oh, that would never happen to me. We hear stories, and I know you do too. You hear stories every few weeks of this marriage has failed, or this person did this stupid thing and now it's causing devastation in the marriage. And you're like, okay, well, that would never happen to me. Be very careful with that. That could never happen to us, because pride goes before destruction. And 1 Corinthians 10:12-13 says, so if you think you are standing firm, be careful that you don't fall, because why? No temptation has overtaken you except what is common to man. So in other words, temptation's common to everybody.
Everybody goes through it, whether you think you're strong or weak, you're going to be tempted.
He'll give you a way out, but don't be cocky thinking that could never happen to me. I could never. I mean,
we get quick to judge people.
We do. So be humble in your strengths, but play to those strengths. Keep working on your marriage. If you've got a great, strong marriage, then embrace that. Keep connecting and do that. But don't ever think that could never happen to me, because then the devil is sneaky. And so,
I think the third thing is we've got to remember we're on the same team.
Yeah.
Man, I mean, there's times that a couple will be going at it, and I'll just pause and I'll say, you're not the enemy. You're on the same team.
Yeah.
And this seems like a silly exercise, but sometimes when they're going at it, talking about an issue that they can identify, I'll have them sit, and typically they're not on the same couch. They're in separate chairs facing each other, almost like going to battle. I'm facing you. And so what I'll have them do is I'll have them sit on a couch or a chair, another side by side, maybe on the sofa together side by side, and then I'll write down the name of what the issue is they're arguing about, and I'll put it in front of them on the back of a chair in front of them, so that they're not arguing face to face with each other.
Yeah.
They're arguing towards that topic.
Yep.
And that's just a real visual symbol of we're shoulder to shoulder here. We're on the same team. We're not battling each other. We're battling that.
Yep.
And we need to work together to find win-win solutions to conquer that, not conquer each other.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big thing, is just remembering you're on the same team. Why do we forget that?
Well, because we're selfish. It goes back to what you were talking about earlier, the flesh. We feel like we have to win. We feel like we get in the heat of the moment, and that adrenaline, we have a tendency that adrenaline comes in there to tell you there's danger, danger, danger. Well, we're feeling danger to our personhood at that moment. We're feeling danger to our emotions, danger that I'm going to lose a battle here. So I'm feeling that. So my tendency is either going to be fight or flight. I'm either going to fight you to win, which makes you my enemy, or I'm going to run away from you because I feel like I'm being pressed in a corner by an enemy. So that's why we do that. And it's that it's that flesh, that human, we don't like to lose. But if you've ever watched a movie or a TV show where you've got a team, you've got a couple that they're both, they're both armed and they're like, okay, get back to back because we're going to face it. No, if it comes from that direction, you get it. If it comes from this direction, I'll get it. And sometimes it's coming from all directions and you see them spinning and like
we saw it last night. It was a spy movie or a TV show we were watching, and these two, they got back to back, and all the bad guys came in and kind of surrounded them, and they just kind of picked them off and spun around. That was kind of cool. And then there was another show we were watching. It was a Western, and they took what was that movie, 1923, whatever, and they were getting attacked, and I can't remember which was 1918 something. And so anyway, so they were getting attacked, and they said get the wagons and huddle in the middle. And so they did, and then they all began to shoot in a 360-degree circle, and they had a plan of attack. And I think that's a great illustration for our marriage, is that we got to remember we're on the same team, and we have to stand back to back to fight this enemy. Yep. And that means standing back to back is I'm aware of these areas that I know I'm weak. You're aware of these areas you're weak. And
I know your blind side, so I'm gonna have your back in that. I'm gonna protect you in that, and you protect me in those areas. I'm weak, and sometimes we step in for each other because we know, hey, beware. Hey, have you thought about that lady's texting you? That seems a little off.
Yeah.
And we're sharing those with each other, and you're like, yeah, that's weird. I'm not gonna, it is after 8:00. That's kind of strange. So we protect each other in that, and we're just like, okay. You may not see this, but I see this for you. So we're protecting each other's blind side. I've got your back and you've got mine. And
so like if there's a big old thing of ice cream, I know that's a weak spot for you. And so I should just eat it so you don't have to.
Protect me from myself.
You. And I would do that for you
I know you
anytime.
I know you would.
Looking at your back. So.
I know.
So this is good. I hope you got a lot out of this episode today. And listen, if you're enjoying the podcast, shoot us a note at Daniel at The Marriage Adventure or Bonnie at The Marriage Adventure, an email, or you can reach out to us on social at The Marriage Adventure, Facebook and Instagram, and check out our YouTube channel. Y'all have a great, great week.